Chapter 7. Horace reached the arguing group just inside the main door and quickly quietened things down, reassuring the servants and guards that the Scandian was a friend and not about to make a one-man attack on Castle Redmont. Will watched as the tall warrior spoke quickly to Svengal, then led him away to a side room. As they went, Horace turned, caught Will's eye, and made an unmistakable gesture for him to join them. Gradually, the people in the hall relaxed as it became apparent that the incident had been resolved and there was no immediate danger. The orchestra, which had tailed off at Svengal's appearance, picked up the melody once more, and eyes returned to the bridal couple. Will saw that Holt and Lady Pauline had paused and were standing motionless in the middle of the dance floor. He crossed quickly to them. "Finish the dance," he said quietly. "I'll take care of it." Holt nodded his gratitude. The last thing he wanted was any kind of disruption to Lady Pauline's special day. "Find out what he wants," he said. Will grinned. "Maybe he's brought you a wedding present." Holt jerked his head towards the back of the room. "Get going," he said. Will grinned again and turned away, taking Alice's hand as he passed. "Come on," he said, leading her off the dance floor with him. He glanced up to catch Gillen's inquiring look as the tall ranger led Jenny down from the dais. Will jerked his head towards Holt and Pauline and mouthed the words, "Keep dancing." Gillen nodded. The less disruption to the normal run of events, the better, he realized. Pauline saw the quick exchange between the two young rangers, then watched as Will picked his way through the tables, Alyss accompanying him. From time to time he would pause, smile at a question from one of the guests, and make what appeared to be a reassuring comment. She admired the speed with which he had reacted, the way he was taking over the situation. "He's growing up," she said to Holt as they began to dance again. Gillen and Jenny now circled the floor with them as well. Then Duncan and Cassandra joined them, followed by the Baron and Lady Sandra. That was the signal for the other dancers to crowd onto the floor. Within a few minutes, most people had forgotten that a travel-stained, weary Scandian had just crashed the wedding party. King Duncan steered his way towards Holt and Pauline, Cassandra moving lightly in time with him. "Holt, any idea what's going on?" he said out of the corner of his mouth. "Will's finding out now, Your Majesty," Holt replied, and the king nodded, satisfied. "Keep me informed," he said, and he and Cassandra circled away. They were replaced by Harold and Sandra as the Baron ploughed through the crowded dancers. Whereas Duncan and Cassandra had circled gracefully, Baron Harold took a direct route, rather like a purple, blue and gold battle horse. Regretfully, Lady Sandra had never been able to pass on the finer points of the dancer's art to her husband. "Holt?" he said as they approached. "Will's checking, sir," Holt told him, and the Baron nodded. "Good. Keep me informed." He and his wife moved off. Holt glanced quizzically at his partner, having to look up slightly to do so. Pauline was tall for a woman. "As soon as I know anything myself," he said. They reached the entrance to the hall. Alyss stopped and turned Will towards her. "Perhaps I should go back to the stable," she said. "This Svengal doesn't know me, and he might feel more comfortable talking if there are no strangers present." As a courier, her instincts for intrigue were finely honed, and Will sensed she was right. There was obviously something out of the ordinary going on. Svengal's abrupt appearance had proved that. He nodded and briefly took her hand in both of his. "You could be right," he said. "Besides, it will look better if one of us is back at the party." He squeezed her hand, then released it. She smiled at him, then turned and slipped back through the crowded room. Will watched her go, then turned away towards the small anteroom where Horace had taken their unexpected visitor. Svengel was slumped wearily on a bench as Will entered. "Will," said the Scandian with a tired smile, rising stiffly to shake hands. "Sorry to barge in at a time like this." Will glanced up at Horace. "What's going on?" he asked. From Svengel's downcast, weary manner, he gathered it was not good news. Horace shrugged. "I thought we'd wait for you. Save him saying everything twice. What's going on out there?" He indicated the hall with a quick head gesture. "It's all back to normal. You got things settled before too many people had a chance to notice. Good work." Horace made a small, self-deprecating gesture, and Will took another look at the Scandian. "You're just about done in, Svengel. Are you all right?" Svengel had slumped back onto the bench. He grinned ruefully, easing his aching back. "I've felt better," he said. "I've spent 2 days and most of last night on one of your blasted horses, all the way from Castle Araluen to here. I can hardly move my legs or back." "Araluen?" Horace interrupted. "What were you doing there?" "We sailed Wolfwin up that same river we took last time. I thought it was the best place to look for you all." Will and Horace exchanged glances. "I imagine that set the cat among the pigeons," Will said. There was a treaty in place between Araluen and Scandia, but even so, the unexpected sight of a wolf ship so far inland could only have caused alarm. "We flew Evenland's pennant," Svengel told him. "We still had it in our flag locker. Is there anything to drink around here?" Will held up his hands in apology. "Sorry, you could probably use something to eat as well," he said. Svengel nodded several times. "Yes, that would be good too. Haven't eaten in a while." Will called to a page who had been stationed outside the door. The young boy put his head around the door frame, staring curiously at the massive Scandian, who grinned at him. "Bring us some wine." No, wait," Will said, as the boy began to dart away. The page returned. "Get us a plate of food as well, a big plate. A platter, in fact, lots of meat and bread. Don't worry about vegetables or greenery." He knew that Scandians had a deep-seated contempt for salads as a food source. "Bring the wine in a flagon," Horace added. "Not one of those dainty glasses they're using outside. And hurry." "Yes, sirs," the page said. He raced away. "So tell us," Will said, "what brings you here in the middle of Holt's wedding?" Svengel shook his head in apology. "Didn't know about that," he told them. "We've been at sea for months now. We need help, and you were the only people we thought could give it." "We?" Horace asked. "Erak and me. Well, Erak really. He told me to come here and find you, and Holt." "So he's still in Hallersholm, I take it," Will said. He was aware that Erak had turned his ship over to Svengel when he had assumed the office of Oberjarl. But Svengel shook his head. "He's in Arida," he told them. "He's been captured by the Aridi, and they're holding him to ransom." "What?" Will's voice rose to a higher pitch than he'd intended. He paused and composed himself. "What the devil is he doing in Arida?" "We were raiding," Svengel explained. "He was bored with sitting around talking to Borsa all day." "I can imagine," Will put in. He still harboured resentment for the Scandian Hilfman, who had assigned him to life as a yard slave, an almost certain death sentence in the bitter Scandian winter. "Get over it," Horace told him, and jerked a thumb at Svengel. "Let's hear the story." But the page chose that moment to return with a platter loaded with chicken legs, pork chops, and a small mutton leg. There was also a tankard of wine on the tray that he set down. Svengel looked greedily at the food and drink. "Oh, go ahead," Horace told him. Svengel drank a third of the wine in one draught, then grabbed the mutton and tore off enough to feed a small family with his teeth. He chewed and swallowed for a few moments, his eyes closed blissfully as the food and drink sent energy coursing through him. He was hungry, Will muttered. Svengel said he'd been riding for 2 days, not a popular way of travelling for Scandians. It was becoming obvious that he hadn't stopped to eat. The sea wolf swallowed a last piece of mutton and took another gigantic gulp of wine. He wiped grease and wine from his whiskers with the back of one massive hand, then let go a belch loud enough to wake the dead. "I take it he likes our food," Horace said. Will rolled his eyes impatiently. "Svengel," he said, "get on with it. How did Erak get himself captured? And how did you get away? What in God's name were you doing in Arida and—" Svengel held up a grease-smeared hand. "Hey, 2 or 3 questions at a time, all right? Look, Erak was bored. He wanted to go to sea again. So he decided to go on one last raid." He paused, considering. "Well, he said it would be his last, but I doubt it. I reckon he—" "Get on with it," Will and Horace chorused together. "Oh yeah, sorry. Well, we planned a raid." "In Arida?" Horace said incredulously, and Svengel looked at him, an injured look on his face. "Yes, in Arida. After all, we're not allowed to raid here these days, are we? We have to go further afield." Will and Horace exchanged glances. "I suppose it's our fault," Will said. "Go on, Svengel." "Anyway, we plan to hit a town called Al-Shabaab. It's a trading town where they provision ships, and we figured, well, Erak figured, there'd be a lot of money there. You see—" "Svengel," Will said, "I'm sure there were excellent reasons for raiding this El-Sheba." "Al-Shabaab," Svengel corrected him, eyeing a chicken leg, then reaching for it. "But just get on with what happened, all right?" "Well, we landed before dawn and everything seemed deserted. No guards, no lookouts. We made our way into the town, and then we realized they'd been waiting for us. There were over 100 troops in there, frontline troops too. Not the usual amateurs you find in those little towns. They were expecting us. They even knew that Erak was coming. They called him by name, knew he was Oberyal, said he was the only one they were interested in." "Let me get this straight. They ambushed all of you? The entire ship's crew?" Horace frowned at the thought. Svengel nodded. "They let the rest of us go because they needed us to collect the ransom. They even returned our weapons once we were back on board. Said they didn't want us captured by pirates while we were fetching the money." He snorted in bitter amusement. "Ironic, isn't it?" "How much is this ransom?" Will asked. 80,000 reals, Svengel said, and the 2 young men whistled. "That's a lot of silver," Horace said. Svengel shrugged. "Erak is Oberyal, after all." Will was frowning as he thought over what Svengel had said. There was something he didn't understand. "Svengel, 80,000 is a lot of money. But surely Erak could put his hands on that amount. As you say, he is the Oberyal. Why did you come here for it?" "Erak told me to come here. It could take the best part of a year for us to get to Scandia and then back to Arida with the money." He trailed off, the thought not quite completed. Will nodded. "That makes sense," he said, "and I'm sure King Duncan will lend the money. After all, Erak saved his daughter's life." He sensed that Svengel had something else on his mind, something he was reluctant to say. "But," he prompted, and the sea-wolf sighed heavily. "Erak didn't want me to go back to Scandia with the news that he was a captive," he said. "He's pretty sure that he was betrayed by one of our own people."